Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to our meeting this evening. Thanks for coming along. Good to see so many of you here. So I'll start off by introducing our guests. We have John Mousinho, Richard Hughes, Andy Cullen. Thanks very much for coming along, guys. And what we'll start with is our usual video message from Michael Eisner. And I'll just play that now.
Hi there. I've got so many things to talk about. I'm going to use a card and I'm going to use my glasses so I don't miss anything. But I wanted to start off by saying how grateful we are to the PST and how supportive they are in all things. The voice of the fans, which are fantastic. Season tickets, all the things that PST has done. Jimmy Dickinson, supporting the Jimmy Dickinson statue. It's been fantastic. Also, PITC has been fantastic, getting the John Jenkins Stadium ready. Claire has always been great in the community, and I just wanted to mention both the PST and the PITC. So let's go through some topics. Let's start with the season. As I speak and as you listen, we're number one in the table. Only by 1 point, and there's a lot to go. And we've had some seasons in the past where the Christmas period has not been great for us, in the January period. But I think this year, with the way we've recruited, having Rich Hughes on board, having John Mousinho as our coach, it feels really good. And these guys are professional, young, on top of it. Management is encouraged. You're encouraged. I'm encouraged. I got my fingers crossed for the rest of the season. We certainly want to get promoted. That's our goal. Always has been our goal. And of course, when we get into the championship, the goal will be to go further, but one step at a time. I want to mention the women's team. I mean, this is really exciting. They're fantastic. We're supporting them financially and supporting them as cheerleaders. They're awesome. Attendance has risen substantially. Will keep rising to the point that they'll eventually be playing at Fratton Park. And I congratulate them. They're also at the top of the table. But again, there's a lot left in the season. And whereas the men's team, 3 teams are promoted, on the women's side, only 1 team is promoted. So keep your fingers crossed for both teams going forward. Let's talk about Fratton Park. I'm really proud of the success we've had physically with not only the park, but with Piglets, with the food. I think by the end of the year, our home fans will be able to occupy the Milton end as it will be completed. The elevator will be up for fans that need to use it. Our attendance is fantastic. Our capacity is fantastic. We've saved capacity, which we would have lost, as you all know, for safety. You know, there was a lot to do in Fratton Park. When you're on the ocean, you have metal and you have salt water, things decay faster than they would in London, say. So Fratton Park is great. We're going to do the gantry, so we have perfect television coverage for Sky when they take over next year. We're also going to do something that Andrew, as the CEO, has a lot of experience in, which is non-game day support with weddings and the like. And we're completely renovating both the inside and the outside of the Victory Lounge. So there's a lot happening in Fratton Park. We've got the safe standing in, done in the Fratton. And oh, by the way, in the North Stand, we're going to expand areas that now are not available for halftime. So the lines, the queues for food, the toilets and the rest will be relieved. There'll be much more space. A lot of these things are, not seen on a daily basis by the fans. The fans are it's much more visible for the fans. Our recruiting, how we're doing on the pitch, our coaches and so forth. But all the back of the house stuff is very important. Of course, talking about back of the house, we now own the training ground. we've redone, the swimming pool and all of that for the public. We're now going to bring the first team into that building, which I think Rich Hughes will be very happy about because he's sitting there alone, and we're going to get rid of all those temporary buildings that are long since past their expiration date. So that's happening. I'm putting my glasses on because I don't want to miss anything here. We're very happy that the government has created an independent football regulator. Now, that sounds weird and odd, but as you know, financial fair play is not working. Many teams are in trouble. Owners are overspending when they shouldn't be, borrowing money when they shouldn't do that. We've never borrowed a dime to support this club. And although this won't affect us as much as it will the rest of the league, you want the league, whether it's League Two, One, Championship, to be able to be sustainable. And I think this is a big improvement. So all in all, between you all and the support of the fans, between the whole community efforts that we have, mainly, I guess, one of the big things is the way we have adjusted the way we recruit, going for young and upcoming aggressive players rather than relying on getting loan players. We have much more aggressive recruiting, much more knowledge about where these players we're looking for exist, improving the training ground, having the first team back into that building. All these things relate to appealing to young players that want to come to Portsmouth. I mean, it's great to come to Portsmouth because of the city itself, but we have to supply decent facilities. Hopefully, at some point, we'll get that bridge on the railroad tracks, so people that come for the train, and many, many do, are able to get to Fratton Park without skirting around cars on a bad way to come, and that will happen. So all in all, I got to say, this is a good time. So I like speaking to you this time, but I will speak to you at times that are not this good. But right now, being number one on the men's side, being number one on the women's side, the investment that we're making, everything feels great, but only as great as we get the support which we've had from PST. So enjoy your meeting. I look forward to seeing you when now that COVID is kind of over. I'm going to get there a lot. Eric Eisner has been there. He was there recently. Breck and Anders, my other two sons, my wife will all be over there much more often now that traveling is easier and safer. So good luck, and let's see if we can stay in the top two going into May. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that, and now I'll hand over to my colleague Donald, who's going to host the Q&A section. Start off with a few questions from Donald before we pass on to questions from the audience.
Excellent, lovely. I have to say I'm particularly thrilled to have you three with us today, and I think together with Michael, we're going to hear from four of the most crucial people at our football club, and we're going to hear about that journey that we've been on. I think you three in particular have taken us on a real journey of modernisation over the last couple of years, and you've landed us in a position where we're top of the league, we're unbeaten. Fratton Park is the best developed it's been in my lifetime, I think. We've just had our biggest crowd in 12 years. You can even finally get a decent beer on the concourse. So it's we're in a really, really good position at the moment. I want to actually start by taking you back to your very first month with us, though, because I think you actually all joined us to differing degrees, quite challenging circumstances. Tony, I'll come to you first. I'd love to hear your reflections on June 2021. You joined us when we just had the very welcome but unexpected news that we could be playing in full stadiums again after COVID. That month saw the very highly publicised racist text messages from the academy players. You had the headache of having to relocate half of our biggest stand to a new area of the stadium. How do you reflect on that couple of years that you've had since then, and what have been your biggest achievements, and what are some of the things that are still work in progress since then?
Well, it certainly wasn't. Is it working now? Yeah, certainly wasn't in the prospectus when I joined. All those things you just mentioned, some of which obviously sort of reared their face in the first few weeks of coming in there. I mean, the best thing that happened when I came here in June 21, there was no guarantee that crowds would come back into stadia. And we got that notice, I think 2 weeks' notice from the government that we could open up. We thought it might be maybe 5,000 to 10,000 fans, and then it would gradually come back. It's only 2.5 years ago, but it seems a lifetime ago now in terms of how all that happened. But no, fully open, off you go, and you start to unravel lots of different things that were happening in those early days, and probably, you have to remember that the staff had been away from the football club for about 18 months, so there's a lot of things that were put into place but hadn't been thought through in terms of how they would work and how they would roll out. So we got through those. I think the second week in, or the third week in, the first week in, we bought the training ground, so that was my second day, and I walked around the training ground and found that the swimming pool walls were basically floating, and the spa was complete. There was a big leak in the ceiling, and I walked down with Steve Cripps and said to Steve, what do you think? And he said, that's about to collapse. So I said, oh, okay. So I went downstairs, I met all the new staff that we were taking over, and somebody said, what are you going to do about the spa? And I'm thinking, yeah, what are we going to do about the spa? And then you've got sort of 40 pairs of eyes all looking at you for the answer and a decision. And I said, I think we better close it down. Then we walked out, played football, and there was nails sticking out, the carpet was coming out. So that was quite challenging, but we made a decision. I thought, how do I explain this to Michael? Because it was obviously going to be a place where we may have to shut the gym down, which he bought. So I went round with Steve, I think Max over the back there, and we took a video and we sent it to Michael, and Michael's words were, I've made some horror movies in my time, I've seen some horror movies in my time, but this is the worst one yet. And I didn't know Michael very well, so I didn't know his sense of humour or anything like that, but to his credit, he put the investment in, and that gym now is fantastic. It's gone from 1,800 members when we took it over. We're now fast approaching 2,800, and we expect to be at 3,000 by Christmas. And then we've got a decision to make as to whether we actually put a ceiling on it because of the size, and we obviously don't want to compromise it. But there was that. There was obviously the incident you talked about, which was a challenge, but I'd like to think we handled that very, very professionally. There was lots of, obviously, media interest, but I think the media were great. They worked with us in terms of, everyone wanted the story, but we were talking about we can't really do anything because there were safeguarding issues, there were parents involved, young children involved, and we got to a decision, and we had to make a very, very difficult decision to obviously part company with some of the scholars as a result of what happened. But I'd like to think through the process, Greg, everybody involved conducted themselves very, very professionally. And I think that gave me a really good sort of insight, knowledge very, very quickly of the people I was working with, because you get to see personalities, understand characters, and that was great. So yeah, I think, and then I suddenly found out a few weeks later that we had to relocate 2,500 season ticket holders mid-season. And again, that's where the supporters really came to the fore, because we set up some working groups. Some of the people in the room I know were on those groups, and we found the solutions as to how we could best do that, and it went pretty seamlessly in terms of not just relocating people, but how they would get the seats back when obviously seats were reconfigured. And we thought that was great for the North Stand, and we found we had to do it again with the South Stands. Challenging. So yeah, there was lots of things going on in the football club at the same time. We obviously came in that summer and we didn't have many players in the building, so there was trialists everywhere in terms of just trying to work out how the squad was going to look like and make it happen. So it was very, very challenging, but it's fantastic because it was just very, very special to be at Portsmouth Football Club and have an opportunity to help shape it and drive it into the next phase. And I was extremely fortunate by the work that my predecessors had done in terms of how Mark had worked with Michael and the board to get to a position where all these plans were in place. They just needed executing. So all that hard work had already been done. And now we look forward and probably talk about some of the things that Michael's just talked about on the video in terms of our next stage in investment and planning and where we're going to take the football club going forward.
Thank you. I think some of those working groups that you discussed there, that's been a real sort of hallmark of your tenure here, actually, that you've involved the supporters, you've set up the groups for match day experience, season ticket sales and so on. I think that's been a big part of the success you've overseen. Rich, coming to you, your first month with us was September 2022. I'm not saying it was your fault, but immediately after joining, we did go on a run of 1 win in 14. And of course, that landed you probably much quicker than you expected to in a real decision, actually, over Danny Cowley, and then, of course, the subsequent move for John. That must have taken you by surprise, the speed at which that situation developed. And you needing to make a really significant gamble, not just with our football club, but actually your own reputation as well. Can you describe that? And you've been fully vindicated. What was that like to suddenly be thrust into that and needing to make massive decisions almost immediately after joining?
Terrifying. No, it was really tough. Because first and foremost, when I came to the football club, Danny was nothing but brilliant with me on a personal and professional basis. I was down here on my own without my family, and we spent a lot of time together, and he was great. But as you alluded to, Donald, we did go on a run where it was sort of 1 win and 14, which was obviously against my old club, in the weird way that football works. And then I didn't anticipate when I walked through the door in September this would be something that we'd be looking at just after the Christmas period, and I think Andy will back me up on this in terms of when you have to go through that process with anyone. It's really, really hard. No matter what results are, you're dealing with somebody's livelihood and having to make a big call that affects people and families. And I know we all desperately want to be successful as well, but I think that's sometimes the harsh reality of this industry we find ourselves in, and we wouldn't swap it, but it is tough sometimes in terms of having to relay those decisions. And then I think the positive thing that went on after that, and I know there was probably a lot of clamour for people to be put in place straight away, but what I think we did really diligently between me, Andy, Tony and the board, we put a criteria in place of what we wanted the next iteration of Portsmouth Football Club to look like, in terms of that head coach, in terms of what they stood for as a person, what they stood for in terms of their style of play, in terms of the football. Could they deliver what we all know everyone at Fratton Park wants, which is A, success, but B, front foot football? And these were the sort of criteria that we led upon, and it brilliantly led us to John. And I also want to probably take this opportunity to thank Andy, because it was, I think, somebody to a lesser extent than Andy would have said, what, you want to hire Oxford's first team player coach as your head coach and you want to interview him, and I think that would have been perceived as crazy in most other places, but we trusted the process, and obviously, as you have probably all got to know John and heard him speak, he speaks so intelligently and articulately and has a real drive and passion for the game. So actually that came across in the interview, and in all honesty, as much as it was a big decision, and I'm sure there was a lot of shock around the footballing world when it was a decision we made, we were all incredibly comfortable because of the hard work and the diligence that had gone into the process of highlighting what we wanted, and B, the process that saw John come out the other end. So we were delighted with that, and I think it's been vindicated in how we've gone so far, but as Michael alluded to, and as we all know, as much as anyone, we know there's still a long way to go and still a lot to be done, so it's not lost on us, but it's been a really positive start, but it wasn't something I probably anticipated having to make a decision on 3 months into the run, but it was situations led us to that certain factor, and I'm very pleased to be sat next to John tonight, and I think his start at the football club's been wonderful, and long may it continue.
I think that brings us on to you, John. Your first. I was very fortunate. I actually got to meet you on your very first match day. I think it would be fair to describe it as a very highly pressurised, combustible situation that day. I don't know if anyone else remembers. It was the day that there was the playing ban of the protests against the owners. I think it would be fair to describe the mood to your appointment as mixed at the time. There was a lot of fan anger for all sorts of reasons, partly due to the sort of run we'd been on, partly the ownership situation, and suddenly you were thrust into this on your very, very first day as a head coach. What are your memories of that day, and particularly just being thrown into that pressure cooker environment like that right off the bat?
So I remember the first day really well. You alluded to us meeting. I think we had the supporters forum over at the PATC building. And I remember Rich and I speak about it. My first question was, how are you going to get us out of a relegation battle? And at the time, I didn't want to admit that was something we were not fearing, but something we were aware of. We're not, I don't think we're idiots, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't blinkered and thinking that one win in 14 games is going to breed a huge amount of confidence in the squad, and we're going to just ride off into the sunset just because we're Portsmouth. And it was a really interesting time. I think Oxford were a point ahead of us. They ended up staying up on on the second last game of the season, and we ended up finishing relatively comfortable in 8th. So the most important thing for us at that time was just to try and build a bit of momentum, and that game was incredibly important. It was just incredibly important. It gave us 3 points that just lifted the pressure. A home win on the day that there was the protest, which wasn't lost on me either. And that really took us into the week really nicely, because we played Fleetwood on the Tuesday. We got 3 points against Fleetwood. We got beaten Saturday against Peterborough, but 6 points that week really made a massive difference in terms of which direction we were looking at the table. I'd always backed us to be able to never have to be looking, never having to be concerned about what was going on behind us. But good sides in the past have had to make sure they pull themselves out of the mire, and otherwise they've gone the other way. So it was exactly that. It was a really pressurised situation, but the whole point of putting myself forward to be a head coach at any point was because I wanted to put myself in pressurised situations. I do enjoy the pressure. Sometimes, sometimes it's too much for certain situations, but I really enjoy the fact that at this football club, in particular at this level, there is a huge amount of pressure for results, and I think it really drives everybody, I think, sat at this table. So I also felt a huge amount of responsibility, because I was sat there a week before I travelled up to Fleetwood as a player. I was sat there as a player coach. I did set pieces. I did have a very, very different role towards the back end of my time at Oxford, but I still was a registered player. I played in the league, in the cup that year, and all of a sudden, Rich, Andy, the board, and then the supporters were putting their faith in me to steer the ship. So I think the most important thing for us at that point was to acknowledge that it was a bit of a left field appointment. We were really secure in the reasons that we'd done it, and we didn't want to have to justify it. We just wanted to acknowledge it and say, okay, fine, we get it. There were, I think, 2 questions that I think Tony asked me in the process. How are you going to change that? I said, well, there are 2 ways. The first way is through performances, and the second way, which is really the only thing that anyone cares about, is results. And I felt it the day at Fratton we beat Exeter. The result went our way. The mood at Fratton Park was lifted straight away, and we had a bit of a mixed bag towards the end of the season, but it just gave us that freedom, I think, at that point, in terms of what we knew at that point was, okay, we've got a week left in this transfer window. There's a bit of work we can do. We brought in Deshaun, and we brought in Paddy Lane, but we knew at that point, okay, our focus now is, where does this squad need to be in 6 months' time in order for us to have a chance of being successful next season? That literally all came in the space of the first week.
I think turning up to that supporters meeting literally kind of 3 hours out from your first kick-off, spoke to some of your personal qualities, actually, the bravery to come and front up there and get some pretty robust questions from some pretty unhappy people at the time. I think that it was quite a good window actually into just why you'd impressed so much through that process. So bringing us right up to date, then obviously we're unbeaten, we're top of the league, we haven't lost since March. I think the real hallmark of the season so far has been that the team just don't give up, and we've seen it time and time again. We've come from behind and got results. What do you put that down to? What is the quality that this team have that keep they keep coming back?
So it's not a big phrase that we necessarily use, and it's probably churned out a bit too much in football. But one of the things that Rich alluded to there in terms of the interview process was that by the time you get to the back end of it, it's about trusting what you've done, trusting the process to get you at that stage. And that's what we try and drill into the players, is that, okay, there are going to be ups and downs in football games. There are some games plenty of games we've had this season where we've gone a goal behind, and I don't think we deserve to go a goal behind. The Wycombe game was a great example, and my message to the players during that, before the game at half-time, is fine, these things happen in football, get on with it, trust what we do every single day, trust the plan, stick with it, make sure that we're consistent in the way that we go about things, and you will eventually get results through a 46-game season. And I think that's worked out pretty well for us. So even when we have the setback that we had last weekend, where it went against us because we didn't, we used to nicking last-minute winners or last-minute equalisers. All of a sudden, it went against us. It was much more about looking at the game as a whole and going, okay, did we play as we wanted to play? And I think for the most part against Charlton, we played pretty well. So we weren't particularly concerned about that. Those are going to be the ups and downs that we have through the season. We just have to make sure we stick to the plan, trust in what we're doing, trust in the players that we've got. If we have setbacks, injuries, suspensions, we've got players to come in. Next man up in terms of the squad, and just go and go again. The season changes so much that you have to make sure you're resilient enough to deal with those small ups and downs and the massive ups and downs as well. And I think it's the only way you can look to have any success in a long football league season.
You mentioned some of those ups and downs and the ebb and flow of a season. I think one of the things that's really come up in the last month or two has been some of the injuries that we've received. Obviously, Regan Poole possibly sort of the headline amongst those. How are you reacting to that? And what's your kind of response to it? Is that something that we're going to look to resolve within the current squad? Are you looking to January already to sort of tie that up? How are you going to approach that?
So the immediate reaction in terms of everything that we do when someone is injured, someone is suspended, there's a drop in form, is, okay, what have we got in the squad next? So not a problem. Regan was suspended along with, I think, Alex Robertson against Port Vale. And obviously it wasn't the perfect scenario. We always want to have more players to pick from, but it was a really simple case of Ben Stevenson, Sean Raggett, first league starts, step up to the plate. We ended up winning the game, and they both found themselves out of the side the following week because that's the way that the squad works. So, in the moment, it's very, very easy in football to sort of catastrophise and think, well, this is the worst possible thing that can happen. The reason we built the squad the way we built it in the summer was to try and be able, as best as possible, to sustain these sort of periods. There was a really good article last week about what's going on in the Premier League at the moment and how many injuries there are. They're always going to happen at some point during the season. So. We need just to make sure that we get on with it. And of course, we're not just going to go, okay, we're going to get on with it, ignore everything else. Tino got injured, so we thought it might be a good time to bring Josh Martin in because that space in the squad probably wouldn't have opened up otherwise. And likewise with Regan's injury being till the end of the season, we'll now look with a slightly different approach in January. There'll be no panic. We'll make sure we do everything for the best of the long-term future of the football club. But yeah, just making sure that between now and then there's nothing we can do. Apart from in Josh's case, sign a free transfer, and then come January the 1st, really look at it in the whole and think, okay, what is the plan now based on everything that we have in the squad, and just taking a really sensible approach to it.
Brilliant. So looking ahead to January, I'm keen to sort of hear each of your perspectives on this. Andy, obviously you'll have been sort of speaking to the owners and sort of getting a gauge of what might be feasible, what the kind of budget is. Rich, I'm sure you're kind of looking at targets, and John, you're thinking about how to piece that all together in the first team. So Andy, first of all, so I'm sure it's a question we're really keen to hear about. What is the scope for player signings in January? What's the room in the budget, and also in the sort of in terms of the loan signings, things like that?
I think the first thing to say is that we've been really, really fortunate that throughout my time here in different windows, we start the season off with a budget, and I think every year we've probably gone over and above, and that's because the owners will want to invest. I think there's been a real show of confidence over the course of the summer that we invested in transfer fees. A number of them, not just one or two players, but in young emerging talent. So it's not just about thinking about January end of the season, it's thinking about long term in terms of what we're trying to do in recruitment. So we hold monthly recruitment meetings with the board, which summarises all the work that's been done the prior month by Rich and his team in the recruitment, with John, whatever. So we're already identifying players from the end of last August in terms of where we think we can make the difference. But it's a strategy, and the strategy still very much is, now we're seeing it executed. We saw it start to take shape last January with Paddy coming in to the team and Riley Towler, and then over the course of the summer in terms of what we do. So we're just keeping that sort of long term, making sure we've got the right mix in terms of balance. We talk about reducing the emphasis on loans because that's giving us long strength, stability. There's nothing wrong with loans, but we were spending twice as much as any other club in League One on loan players, and that's not really good. And I think that was just a race for promotion, and we just wanted to build this long-term stability. So, we win promotion, brilliant. We've got a good core, a good spine, and good young talent coming through. We've got a modicum of experience as well. So the others, because they believe in that strategy and what we're trying to see, seeing it unravel now, and that's what we're continuing to invest in, Donald. So it will be a long-term approach, and we will make the case for individual players, what we want to do, and I think having had that confidence, we see it, and I'm seeing it not just on the field, I'm seeing it the stuff we're doing off the field now as well, and a willingness to continue investment in right across the football club.
So Rich, that gives you the green light a little bit then. There's going to be scope to make some signings in January if the right player comes up. Tell us a little bit about what sort of quantity we're looking at. Are we looking to sign 2, 3 players? What sort of profile we're looking at? Not necessarily in terms of what areas on the pitch, but actually the type of player you're wanting to recruit, and maybe also what sort of markets are you going to be looking at? Because actually, you've gone to some less common places like Australia to recruit from. How far are we casting the net this January?
try and take them in reverse order. So we cast the net as wide as we can whilst doing it sensibly. So one of the things that we built upon with like Northern Ireland and Australia, we felt they were good markets for us to start to target. Australia particularly because of the like the GBE exemptions that came through, but actually there was a high proportion of players playing in the A-League with British passports, so it made a lot of sense for us to figure that out. So Kaz has got a British passport. We highlighted 3 or 4 other players that we liked and were able to sort of process through. So we will cast the net wide, but we'll only do it sensibly. We don't want to be scattergun. We don't want to just dip into different markets without having the volume of knowledge on everything that we're doing. In terms of the characteristics, I think I won't mention the player, but one of the players I spoke to last week, he said this is the best dressing room he's been involved in, which was quite a telling statement from a player, but also it tells me, John, that we have to, whatever we do to recruit, we bring people in that reflect that, reflect what we're trying to achieve, reflect what this group stands for, and they've done a lot of their work in terms of how they want to be seen and what they want to be known as, and I think that shows in their togetherness. In terms of numbers, probably not the answer that anyone actually wants to hear. It's going to be a completely non-committal one. We've got 10 games between now and January, which changes the landscape substantially from various things, but we're aware of where we want to strengthen in different positions. I think centre-backs are an area because we built the squad to compete with 4 centre-backs. Obviously Regan's going to be out till the start of next season, so we have to reflect upon that. And then it's going to be, as Andy said, things that reflect the strategy that we're trying to do. There might be, there's going to be players that we feel can make the team better in January, but there might also be opportunities to bring in players that we feel are going to progress us over the next 6, 12, 18 months. And I think the exciting bit of that is we brought in someone like Terry Devlin in the summer, and there's a relative unknown quantity, and then all of a sudden we're now sat here in November. He's been away with the Northern Irish senior team. He started and scored in the first team for us. Started for the 21s against England the other night, and they're like, these are the nice opportunities when you recruit in a certain way that you can start to impact things. And the sort of last thing I say on this January, I think last January was my first transfer window at the club, and one of the difficulties and frustrations we found, we had 5 loan players, so there was a balancing act to be had in terms of if we could bring loan players in, and we were close to the limit on the squad list. Now, as Andy alluded to, the strategy we've had is less reliance on loans, so we've only got 3, so there's scope to do something there should we choose to do so. And because we've actively recruited younger players, we've got more space on the squad list to allow us flexibility, and that was one of our frustrations in January, that there was a lot of sort of knock-on effects of the way the squad was at that point, and now we feel we've got a little bit more freedom and flexibility to operate and do what we feel we need to do in January to make us better.
You've highlighted centre-back obviously as a sort of key priority for January. I'm interested to know to what extent a really important injury like that affects the club's long-term strategy. Is it actually, we really need a 6-month stopgap signing to get us over the line this season, or are we still thinking about, we'll buy young, we'll buy someone that, they might start for us next season, and, hopefully they can develop at the tail end of this year?
Again, completely non-committal, but it just depends on what's available. What we won't do is make decisions that will harm us in the longer term. If we think there's good opportunities to invest in young players, we'll absolutely do it. If there's opportunities for us to make the team better, we absolutely will do. But I think we're all devastated Regan's got injured. He's a wonderful young man. He's a fantastic footballer. But we're also in a scenario where, out of our core of 4 centre-backs that we've got, Conor Shaughnessy's been excellent this year. Riley Towler's a talented young player who played a lot for the football club last year and did really well. And Sean Raggett is a very talented footballer who wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's never ever let this football club down. So what we are really fortunate in, that core of centre-halves we've got, they would get into most teams in this league, and we're really fortunate to have them as part of the group. So we'll reflect that in terms of what's available for us to recruit in January and work around that accordingly.
John, I'm really interested to hear from you about this new dynamic that we've got at the football club. It's the first time that we've got a sporting director working with a head coach, where perhaps it's the sporting director taking a bit more of a lead on transfers. Can you give us a bit of an insight into how that works in practice? Who's taking the lead on things? does Rich sort of suggest players to you? You know, how big a say do you get in that, and where have the arguments come so far?
They might come in January. I think that the best way to describe our working relationship is that we're very much a partnership, and that extends to every single thing that we do. So, you know, Rich and I, if we're not together every day, we speak every day. It might be a phone call, it might be a text. Sometimes pick up the phone on a Sunday afternoon, and it's a bit like, yeah, I just needed to. It sounds a bit weird. Need to hear your voice and a bit of reassurance about the game yesterday. But it's just, you know, we just have that constant conversation. And the interesting thing about the way that the recruitment works with us, and it's a model that I am now extremely familiar with because it's the only model I've operated under as a head coach. But I'm much more familiar with because of the work that's been done, say on the pro license, and then. Particularly recently, what I've been familiar with at football clubs, or what I've known is going on at football clubs, is that in terms of recruitment, for example, again, it's a real collaboration between myself, Rich, and our head of recruitment, and there's no sort of cut and fast in terms of, okay, these are the rules, this is how we've established it. Rich has been very, very open with me since day one, which was, if you want to bring a football player into the club, you can do it. And if you don't want to bring a football player into the club, we won't do it. And that has worked very, very simply, I think, in our favour. The way that we recruit means that I'm involved all the way through, probably much heavier at the start and at the back end, because we've got a really fantastic recruitment team with scouts, and obviously Rich himself going out and seeing players, doing a huge amount of video work. Hence, we managed to get a player over from the A-League. And I see all of that throughout, but thankfully for me, it's very different from when I started playing 17, 18 years ago, where the manager did everything and had to do everything, which means I can just focus on the football side, so I can you know, really concentrate on what we're doing on the pitch, and that extends beyond recruitment as well. So, believe it or not, there are 1,000 different things that Rich thankfully takes care of for me, due to a toaster blowing up at the training ground. I don't have to deal with that. To anything, you know, it can be really trivial things, and it can be really, you know, top end, high level issues. And the way that we work has been really, really successful. We're very, very open and honest with each other. We don't always agree on football, which is absolutely fine. I think if we did, it would be a pretty unhealthy relationship. But we don't always agree on football. Myself and John Harley and Zesh and all the analyst team, we always make sure that we have healthy debate around what we need to have healthy debate around, and then when we make a decision, it's okay, that's our decision, we're going to go with it, and we're going to support each other. And that's the way that it's worked so far, and it's worked really well.
I'll let you decide who answers this of the three of you. Let's say January. John says, you know, we need to go out and spend big on a centre back. We need to spend £1 million on a 30-year-old centre back to get us over the line this season. Rich says, no, you know, we've got to think long term. We've got to get someone young that's going to grow with us. Who gets the casting vote, and how's that played out?
I think it's never as cut and dry as that, but one of my commitments to the board and to the football club when I came in was, and we've tried to do this in everything that we've done, was we want to make decisions in the long-term interests of Portsmouth, and we try and underpin everything we do with that in mind, whether it's the training ground renovations, whether it's something at Fratton Park, whether it's a player transfer. If we have that in mind, we think that we're going to be doing the right things. And I think the only way you can do that is if you don't take a short-term approach to football. Now, we want to win. We want to be in the Championship yesterday. There's no doubt about that. But we also want to do it the right way. And because the club are taking that long-term approach, it makes those sort of conversations a bit easier. If that did happen, we'd have a chat about it. If there's money in the budget to go and get it, and that's the best thing, then if that is the best thing for the football club, then I'm sure we'd come to the conclusion that we do it. But the way that we want to set this up is that we're all aligned, and if you've got alignment from top to bottom, then you don't end up having a head coach or a manager that wants to go out and solve all the problems by just putting a plaster over it or papering over the cracks, and you don't have a sporting director that wants to do the complete opposite. You actually end up with that alignment where you go, we may disagree on some small nuances of players here and there, but the overall picture is very, very laser focused, and I think that's the key. If we ever had to have that debate, we've probably gone off on the wrong direction anyway.
Brilliant. We're really keen to hear some of your questions as well, so I'll give you a moment to think about this. I'll ask one more from me for now. Rich, we've sort of alluded to a little bit there to the fact that your role is far wider than just transfers. I think for Pompey fans, it's a little bit hard to get their heads around initially about sort of what your remit is and how involved you're going to be in the day-to-day running of the club. Can you just walk us through what an average week might look like for you as the sporting director? What sort of things do you deal with?
If I ever have an average week, I will be sure to report back and let you know what it looks like. Incredibly varied, it genuinely is, and I think I've said this to a few people before who've had these sorts of forums. My job is to alleviate as much pressure from the day-to-day running as possible on John. We've both got skill sets, we work together really closely, as John alluded to there. But my job is to take away as many of the smaller bits and pieces, and my sole responsibility is to make sure John can focus on football. So an average week for me, normally, Donald, I will be at the training ground on Monday, or sitting with the coaching staff, the games reviewed. I'm then probably dragged off to go and speak to the groundsman, the chef, speaking to the head of recruitment to catch up on the weekend's games, try and get out to 21's games on a Monday night, or be out watching opposition, watching players on a Tuesday night. Normally on a Wednesday I'm with Andy, because one of the things that we've really tried to tie together as a club is we've got a lot of staff at the training ground and a lot of staff at Fratton Park, and it would be remiss of me to not mention that, because it's really important the work that goes on at Fratton Park that allows us to do our jobs in terms of the pitch on a Saturday, and they're the wonderful people that facilitate everything that we try and do on match days and throughout a part of that. So it's create those sort of connections. Thursday we quite often get dragged to supporters meetings, and just everything, genuinely everything in between. We spend a lot of time together as a staff. We all really enjoy each other's company, and it's just making sure that we've got the people that are really skilled in different areas doing their jobs, and that would be sort of my job in a nutshell, facilitating all the really talented people we've got at the football club.
Fantastic. If you have questions of your own, please do put your hands. I would love to hear them. Go ahead.
Actually, first question to John.
Go ahead, switched on.
First question to John. Not so much about this season, but thanks for playing football that's entertaining. That's great. But you were a player, and suddenly and as a player, you were one of the lads, obviously, and whatever. How do you make that transition into becoming a manager where, I think there was a player here at the time, he's not here now, who said, when they said, what do you know about John? He said, he used to pinch me when we were playing. I won't mention his name, but he's still playing now, but not here. But I mean, that sort of thing. Obviously, there's probably guys there in the team that you've played against. How do you go from being one of the guys to being a manager? Because normally here, as long as I can remember, most managers have long since retired. There's only one, I think Andy Alford is the only player I can think of that was young enough to come straight in as a manager. But how do you find that?
So I think, first of all, it probably has become apparent in, I suppose, the last few months. My sole focus in the last couple of years of my career was to transition into coaching and hopefully becoming a head coach. Albeit I didn't envisage coming to Portsmouth quite so early in my career, but I had been building up for that. I'd actually been building myself up for what I thought was going to be a slightly more difficult transition, because as I said there, I didn't think Portsmouth would come knocking. I thought the most realistic path was probably at Oxford, and if I'd done that where I was one of the lads in the change room at Oxford, it would have been a really different and probably difficult dynamic, because I'd been on Christmas dues with the boys. I'd organised things in pre-season. I'd do the fines list, all those sort of things, and I'd pinch them in training. So I had prepared myself for that, and then at Portsmouth, it simply became a really sort of clear-cut thing where I had this interesting moment as well, where we played Fleetwood on the Tuesday night, the fourth day into the job, and 10 days earlier I'd travelled with the boys. Oxford had gone and played Fleetwood away, and I travelled on the back of the bus. I've been involved in everything. and all of a sudden I was sat at the front of the bus. And my sole focus at that point was, okay, you were playing in this dressing room or a similar dressing room a week ago. What would you have wanted to see out of your head coach? What would you want to see out of the person leading you? And the simple answer was, it wasn't to be one of the boys. You don't want a head coach or to be your friend. You want them to be friendly, you want them to be approachable, but you don't want them to be one of the lads. You don't want them to be one of the boys. You want somebody who can actually lead you, who can help you out in your career. And so in that sense, it became really easy for me because, okay, fine, I played against some of these players, but it was pretty straightforward coming into it, and then being on the other side. All players are after, in my opinion, is they want somebody who is good at their job. And so my big focus was, okay, be good at your job and they won't care about anything else that's gone before. I played with a couple of the players in the dressing room as well. I played with Marlon, obviously Gavin White, we signed recently, I played with him. And it's a different relationship to what I had when I was in the changing room with both of them, but the only thing that they're concerned about is whether I know what I'm doing, and vice versa. I just want them to do their job. So one of the big advantages I suppose I had was coming straight from the dressing room. I knew what I wanted from a head coach, and I think I knew what the boys wanted as well, and I just tried to make sure that I took as many of those qualities and put them into what I do day to day as possible.
What do they call you, boss, John?
I said it was fine if they want to call me John. I had no issue with it. I don't think you derive any sort of authority from being called anything else, but in football, in football, yeah, Mr. Mousinho, I should have got to call me. Yeah. They all call me Gaffer, all of them. I said they don't have to, but they all do. After about 30 seconds of telling them they can call me what they want, Rico Hackett came up to me and said, "Thanks, Gaffer." Right, and they all call me that, and that's just entrenched in football. And to be fair, if I see one of my old managers, definitely not first names, particularly if it's Martin Allen. It's definitely Gaffer at that point.
Speaking of Allens, I'm conscious that we've got Neil on the front row here who's hungry for a newsline. Andy, there's a report in the Times this week about the fact that the FA are considering taking action on use of an unsolicited agent for the purchase of Jermaine Defoe from Spurs back in 2008. Obviously that predates your time at the club by many, many years. How does that impact the club? Have you sought any legal advice on that, and how likely are we to come under any scrutiny from that?
I just don't know, because there's absolutely nothing in the story for us, because I think we go back, it's 6 ownerships ago, it's 3 club companies ago, I think, Simon, yeah, in terms of where it is. Nobody was around. The FA will have all the paperwork relating to that transfer, so they can conduct their own investigation. So from my perspective, one thing that irked me about the whole thing was that Neil Weld, who's our head of media, got a call from the journalist who broke the story, asking us for a couple of questions, a couple of comments. We went back. It was, I think the two questions were: did we know anything about the fact that the individual at Portsmouth had at the time had been speaking to an unlicensed agent, and secondly, was there any truth that, were the club aware that there'd been a FA investigation arbitration case under what's called Rule K? And the answer was quite pretty simple. None of us were here. We had no knowledge of anything. We answered the question directly, and it was disappointing that the journalist actually put it into his copy, the quote from us, and then the next day was saying Portsmouth refused to comment. And I never believe that no comment is the right thing to do in anything. I think if you can't give an answer, sometimes you'll say, "I'll find out, we'll do more about it." But in this case, we gave a straight and honest answer. So that's where the case currently lies. I think my interpretation, and I'm following the story probably as many as you, probably nobody in this room probably knows more. I think Simon, from the BST, predates the current board and the current executive, but will know nothing about it as well. So there's no, all the documentation will be there with the FA. There's certainly no documentation at Portsmouth for us to look back on. So that's where we are with it. And I'm sure if the FA finds some new evidence or some new light, they'll come to those people who were involved at the time.
Thank you very much. Do put your hand out if you've got some questions of your own, or sort of catch my eye in between. John, first of all, one for you. When Liam Manning joined Bristol City, I think that was quite a rude awakening for a lot of Pompey fans, with the sudden realisation that actually, yes, Championship clubs do look at high-achieving League One managers. You're not going anywhere, are you?
No, the answer is no. I think the other answer is I'd never want to pledge my eternal allegiance to Portsmouth, because it's just, it's not the right thing to do. It's just a lie. But my commitment is to Portsmouth. I think I know that there was no one else that was going to pluck me out of a dressing room from Oxford as an unknown, I think, back in January, and take me to this role, which I don't mind admitting here. If you told me you're going to manage or be the head coach of Portsmouth at some point in your career, I thought that would be the pinnacle of it. So I'm extremely grateful to be here. I think I owe a huge amount to Rich, to Andy, to the owners for actually bringing me in, and I feel a massive responsibility to try and go through with everything that we set out to achieve. And I am still an incredibly inexperienced head coach as well. I think 45 games, something like that, in charge. If that, so I think there's plenty to learn in that respect as well, and plenty to achieve at Portsmouth. So it's one of those things that happen. People want to try and achieve their ambitions as high as they possibly can. One of the other great things about Portsmouth is that Portsmouth, I think we all know, if we get to the next level, like Michael said there, the ambition then is to go to the Premier League and to get back to where the football club knows it belongs, and that's incredibly powerful as well, to be sat in this seat and go, well, it's not actually a stepping stone. Portsmouth as a city, as a football club, has got everything in place to get back to where it was in the Premier League, and ultimately that's everybody's ambition in this room.
Good answer, thank you. Question on the front row just here.
Thank you. Another follow-on question for John, if I may. A lot of managers come to clubs with a reputation. Fans know what to expect, whether they love it or hate it. In your case, that wasn't the case, and all we've known about you is what you've achieved since you've been here, which is obviously extremely positive. So thank you for that. What would you say you possess in terms of skills and personality, which has helped you to be so successful so far? And a slightly more difficult question is, what do you think you need to improve in terms of your skills and personality as a manager to make yourself even more successful?
A really interesting question. I think in terms of the first question, the only way I can really answer it is probably the things that I've found, I guess, relatively easy coming into the role. And I was very, very fortunate towards the back end of my career to be involved in many different things, to be a captain in the dressing room, to be involved on the coaching side, to have massive exposure to recruitment, team selection, staff meetings, and then to be the chair of the PFA as well, which meant I had to deal with so many different stakeholders. A big part of this role is, I think, the ability to deal with the many different people that have got an interest in the football club. So I would like to have as good a relationship with the supporters trust as I would with the players that I deal with every day. And it's a very different conversation when I get to speak to you guys individually or as a group than it is when I go into the dressing room tomorrow morning and I have to put on a couple of different hats, or when I speak to the owners, and I always want to be authentic to myself, but it's just a different conversation. So I think personality-wise, that's probably something I hope that I do relatively well, and it is really an enjoyable part of it as well. I can speak to an 18, 19-year-old supporter, and I then also have to take under my wing a 16-year-old lad who comes into the first team, as Kobe Motto did last year. In terms of skills to take myself, I think, to the next level, the biggest challenge that I think I have every week is how advanced coaching and tactics have become in football. And they've really shifted from when I first started playing. And I always go back to it. I first started playing in 2005. Every side played 4-4-2. There was no analysis. If you got hold of a videotape, then that was because you'd been beat 4-0 on a Saturday and you were hauled in on the Sunday to watch it on the old VHS. And there was nothing in terms of the deep breakdown that we have of football games today. And I think that means that you have to be at the real cutting edge of everything in terms of analysis, in terms of tactics, in terms of the way you set teams up. And then you also have to marry that with the fact that football's just a game and you've just got 11 young, hungry lads that just want to play football, and getting the right blend of those two, I think, is probably the area, particularly on that right-hand side, sorry, I'm looking at it tactically, where it's really going to football is only going to go one way. It is going to become more diluted with coaches that know what they're talking about, have got a plan, and they want to execute it. And then obviously it's my job to try and be on the better side of that. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you. Do we have a question in the middle there? Yeah, fantastic.
One for John, please. Oh, hi. This is a tactical question. Defending corners. We never put a man up. We always defend with 11 men back. We've got players in the team who can't head the ball. Now, when I played, it was a few years ago, and managed, we always left one man, sometimes two, halfway line. Because if the ball did drop out, we had somebody there to come and at least attack the ball, or probably even try and break out. So why is the philosophy now? We don't have a man up on the halfway line. Just your opinion, please.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons. We did try it towards the back end of last season.
Wickham tried it. They put two up.
Yeah, and there is a reason that we've gone back to not doing it. So when we concede a corner, the first thing we have to think about is not conceding.
Yeah.
So that is the biggest priority for us. And so whatever we do, the decision we make is to make sure that we don't concede. And the second part of it is that if we are going to leave someone up, then we're going to leave someone up with pace that can hurt them. What we've had, particularly this year, is our quickest player probably is Abu Kamara, right? He's also very good in the air.
No, he's not.
So what we do with Abu, we have him back. So we actually have him in the zone a lot of the time, which probably shows you.
He fills the space.
So he fills the space, but he's much more competent than a lot of wingers. And we tried it last year, so I think a couple of times we left Joe Morel up, probably not the quickest to be able to counter-attack. And then it's just a game of cat and mouse with opposition. A lot of the time, if opposition do leave two up against us, when we're attacking, we think, oh, this is great, because we've got 7 big lads that are going to go and attack the ball. And a lot of the time, that's the reason they do it as well. They want to drag players, they want to drag players back. So I completely get it. There are more than one way to defend corners, attack corners, to play football. So yeah, completely understand it. When we tried it last year, we felt we were just left slightly short defending. And then the ultimate answer is, my great cop-out is that Joe Perdomo does the set pieces. You'll have to ask him. But the reason we trust him to do set pieces is because he's been so good at doing them, and he will 100% have taken that fully into account. And if Joe came to me and said, I want to leave 3 people up, I'd say, absolutely trust you, we leave 3 people up. And he will debate that in his own head. Trust me, he'll debate it in his own head. And it's a really interesting point, and neither of us are right or wrong. That's just the way it is.
No, it's just times have changed.
Yeah.
We'll look out for free left up at...
we'll do it on Saturday, yeah.
Go on. I dare you.
I've got a question for Andy. And it's regarding future capacity of the stadium. We know that once we get the bridge, that there'll be the potential for the north stand to increase capacity, and I know that there's a few in the corners. Is it also possible for them to put in the future second tier on top of the Fratton end? And if that is possible, with all the other advances, what could that potentially take the capacity to?
That's a very good question, and I think one that's sort of could be debated long and hard. And I think probably just to give some context to the cost of putting second tiers on stands. So there's 3 probably projects at the moment which are underway, all in the Premier League. So if we take Liverpool first of all, which the project has stalled a little bit, but nevertheless the aim there is to increase the Anfield Road stand, and they would gain, I think, 5,000 seats at a cost of £80 million. So you then go into Fulham, who've just completed the stand by the river. I think they bought a piece of the Thames for £5 million. But the cost of that project, which gives them an extra 3,500 seats, that's also cost them 80 million, probably rising to about 110 with all the associated developments. And then the other project is one that's just got planning permission, is Nottingham Forest. And again, that's doing the Peter Taylor stand. And the Peter Taylor stand would give them an extra, I think, 5,000 seats. I think Liverpool was 7,000, Forest is 5,000, and that's £100 million to actually do that development. So the best place to do this, when we do it, will be the North Stand, because then we can maximise the capacity. You're going to be probably in and around that ballpark to do that extension, and we could get probably anything between 5,000 to 7,000 seats by doing it that particular way. So that's the vision in terms of what we want to achieve. Now, quite clearly, an extra 5,000 seats is probably going to give you the best part. If you're getting about £200 a seat over a season ticket, 5,000 seats over the course of a season is basically going to be £1.5 million, £2 million. You've got your associated revenue spend you get in the stands as well. So we've got to look at other ways of doing it. So that stand needs to become really multifunctional in terms of creating more event space, potentially office space. There'd be other stakeholders who have their eyes on certain areas. Historical Society, for example, might want a museum in there, which would be a great thing for Portsmouth. But where else can we actually grab the revenue? So that would help a little bit. But the really big thing will be the development of the site behind us, which is why we own a lot of the land going from the car park, and there's some properties that we own as well. And what we'd like to do, this is all in the Portsmouth local plan, so it's not me making it up on the spot, but you'd be looking potentially at 450 residential units is what we'd be looking at. We'd be looking at potentially a hotel going up as well. Obviously, I've been involved in 2 hotel developments in my 2 previous clubs. And then we would potentially look at other sort of mixed commercial use. You used to be able to do it with retail, but you can't do it with retail anymore. That's gone. It's all about residential and other mixed-use commercial property. So I think we could get to a stage there where that land certainly wouldn't, development that land, enabling development as it's called, wouldn't raise all that money, but then you narrow the gap. Once you start to narrow the gap, you get to a really good position. However, to get to that stage, we really need to get the infrastructure, because it's all in the Portsmouth local plan, that for us to get any further development going, for the Pompey Centre to get anything going, then you need the infrastructure, and particularly the links with transport. Because if we do 450 residential units, apartments or whatever they might be on this site, you're probably, from the local council, in terms of planning consent, going to get 1 car to every 3 units. So people have to rely on and use public transport to get about. So this is brilliant, because what it does is it creates a better case. Take the narrative away from match days, which is what debate's been all about with Network Rail and other stakeholders. It's about 365 days by creating conference facilities which people can drive to but might want to come to by train. We use the match day experience, we use the residential, we've got the work, the Pompey Centre have got some outline ideas, and their heads about some residential on part of that site as well. So we regenerate the whole area. And we create a case. So we've got to work really hard. And all I do is, I know 1 or 2 people, sort of take a different view from us on the need for it. But the safety after a match down Goldsmith Avenue is not great. I walked down there myself after the last game. Stephen Morgan saw it as well. And you've got conflict with traffic. You've got if you beat the traffic, you then often have to queue to get onto the bridge, because the platforms are closed off because of the volume of traffic coming through to that station. And that's a platform issue. You might not resolve the platform issue, but what you can get to is a safer access, and they can control the platforms on a different route away from Goldsmith Avenue. Then we satisfy a lot of the planning conditions. So I would ask, a lot of supporters have been writing to me. They've also been writing to Network Rail, and they've been writing to Stephen as well, Stephen Morgan, the MP, to help him, because he's been really, really supportive. The council are hugely supportive as well, trying to get this project off the ground. The first stage is to get a feasibility study underway. We're willing to contribute to that feasibility study. It's not about the money, it's about the principle of partners coming in. We've got other stakeholders who will contribute as well. We just need everybody to come to the table, get that first phase done. Then we can see there's about 3 or 4 different options. And to their credit, Network Rail have given us the options in terms of what could happen. But they come across Pompey Centre's land, so Pompey Centre need to be a party to it, council need to be a party to it, we need to be a party to it. We've got South West Railways now engaged with us, which is brilliant, because they want to see improvements to Bratton Station. And the thing I found that I didn't appreciate probably so much at the beginning of this process was that Bratton Station is the most used station in Portsmouth. And perhaps there's a different agenda here, maybe that perhaps people are scared that they not only have to do a bridge, but they've got to make improvements to the station if they, if it starts to go. So it's a bigger thing. And full credit to Stephen and full credit to the council. I think they're making some real good progress behind the scenes. I've got some fairly big meetings arranged via their help and support to try and keep pushing this project. But I'm going to let it go. I'm going to be really on this one. Whatever people might say or whatever people might criticise, because it's the best way of getting this football club forward and getting the capacity that we all want going forward. Because we want to see it, we want to grow, we want to make it all happen. It's getting that bigger vision, that bigger plan working, and trying to share it with people as best we can. I went back to just to finish on Donald, if I may. I know I've waffled on, but just to finish on that one, we went back to the council quite recently because the next stage of the Portsmouth local plan comes out next April. And they wanted confidence for us that we were still committed to this stage. We told them that we are. We've shown them some of the things, how that residential development might work. They're really excited because they need to build new homes in Portsmouth as well to satisfy government targets. So given that commitment, that's given them some confidence. But they still want to see the safer access and the infrastructure around the stage. They want to see reduction in carbon emissions. They want to see a safer route. All the things that are in Network Rail's strategic business plan are the things we're homing on to. Safety, economic regeneration and accessibility. Because if you're in a wheelchair, you can't get over that bridge into the best space. So that's what we're working at. And if any of you do experience problems or experience issues using the train, and one in 5 supporters use the train to come to Fratton Park at the moment, I'd really encourage you to let Stephen, write to the MP. If you're not a constituent, you'll get an auto reply. But believe you me, Stephen will use it, and as will write to Network Rail, write to Andrew Haynes, the CEO, because it will make a positive difference to what we're trying to achieve for not just Portsmouth Football Club, but the whole of Fratton and the whole of Milton.
Sorry, just very quickly, Wrexham, I believe, got 17 million from the government or from the Welsh government to the stadium. Will we have a chance of getting some government money?
I don't know if we will get government money. I think in terms of infrastructure, that's our best bet to try and pursue that one. And another route is the Department for Transport, who actually hold the big budgets when it comes to transport infrastructure. Network Rail are very much sort of handicapped by the way that they are structured, so they're fairly limited if they don't, to put money in. Unless it fits their strategic business priority. So that is a route to potentially go. And one of the early ways we were looking at it was through. Before my time, Mark was looking at it. Mark was looking at it through the enterprise partnerships, see whether they would support it. And then more recently, it's looking at levelling up as to whether we can get levelling up bids. And Claire's been really successful with that in terms of John Jenkins, in terms of getting money from levelling up. So the projects may be running out a little bit in Portsmouth, but it depends on where government policy goes in that direction going forward into an election year. So it's really good. I'm going to let it go though, and just anybody who wishes to support us would be extremely grateful for.
Thank you. Probably only got 5 minutes or so left now, so please don't be shy of your questions. If we can move to sort of one-sentence questions and reasonably brief answers, then we'll get as many as we can in before they finish. Thank you.
Apologies for being late. There was an accident on the M27. So my question is about, John talking about football's changed. What's your definition of a winger? Because I think the wingers today aren't the typical Nicky Jennings, Peter Marinello, where they push the ball past the defender, got to the byline and got it over into the box. So what do you expect your wingers to do in terms of style of play?
Yeah, so my definition of a winger is very similar. I use it interchangeably. So if I say winger, I pretty much mean anybody that plays wide, but I would distinguish between a winger and then a wide midfielder. And so there are very, very different roles that we have. One thing that we're really trying to get is a balance in the squad, and something that we're not going to be able to fix overnight, but we probably want maybe to look at more traditional wingers as well, that have got that pace and that power, and can just knock the ball and go past people. We've got some really good, maybe sort of wide midfield players at the moment. I'd say Paddy Lane is not a terrible mix, but he's much more of a wide midfielder. He's a left footer playing out on the right. He likes to come inside. He can push the ball on the outside and go as well, but he relies on his technicality rather than his top end physicality. So I share the same definition as you. And it's about, I think, between those two positions, having 4 players that just have a real balance between everything that we try and achieve. And we also look at that in relation to our fullbacks as well, because a lot of the time our fullbacks push them really high as well. So I think a really interesting question and something we're always looking at.
So the question just around here. Yeah, thank you.
John, This is the question you've been waiting for. You put your PFA, old PFA hat on, Chairman, your coach's hat, and your old player's hat on. To paraphrase Kevin Keegan, added time. I love it. I love it when we have added time. It's going well for us at the moment, bar one the other week. What's your view on it? Are you in favour of it, or are you against it? And depending on your answer, I'll add something else.
Okay, so the very brief answer is I think it helps us because I think sides come to Fratton Park and they slow the game down. And so when we've had added extended periods of 7, 8, 9 minutes, and it even happens away from home, we're seeing now sides do want to slow the game down. And for us, the added time for the most part is a real benefit. We have to take the rough with the smooth because sometimes we've been leading in games and all of a sudden they put up 8 minutes and I think, oh my God, why am I supporting this? But for the most part, I think it helps because we were really frustrated towards the back end of last season with time wasted.
Okay. Now I know the PFA, maybe not many people know this, they did conduct a survey amongst their members. You're probably not a member now. I don't know what the balance was within our dressing room, but apparently it was 60% of players complained that it was more tiring, it was more exhausting, more injuries, etc., etc. Now, when I'm watching the game, there's an awful lot of standing about. The players down injured, bit of a drink break. My favourite one is the goalkeeper with the wipe the boot on the back of the left leg, wipe the boot on the back of the right leg. Look at the manufacturer's name on the ball, move from that side to that side, put it down, change my mind, go back. So we get 9 or 10 minutes added time, but I don't think in reality the players are playing 90 because there's a lot of standing about. So do you agree that players are not actually playing longer than they think they are going to do?
So I think that part of the problem we've had this season, and I'm very vocal with referees and the PGMOL about this, is that because referees have got the ability to add the time on, what we're seeing a lot of the time now is they're not hurrying the game up. So there's two parts to it. I think it's great that if there's a stoppage or if there's a goal or if there's a substitution, they add the actual time on that takes. But the other part of it is it shouldn't then be a cop-out to have games go on exactly as you described there. So it shouldn't be, I shouldn't be speaking to the fourth official and the fourth official says to me, it doesn't matter how slow the game is because time's being added on, because it actually kills the momentum of the game. So I still want games to be exciting for us to play in and for you guys to watch as well. So my firm position is that it's great that this time's being added on, but we should still see referees proactively trying to manage games and move the game along really quickly. And of course, I think everybody, the answer is in terms of LMA, PFA, everybody's got a part to play in that. So players slow games down, probably because it's at the request of the manager and the coaching staff, and just because they like to manage games well anyway. And so everybody's, I think, got a part to play in just terms of making the game a bit better, a bit more exciting. The higher up you go, I think the more ball in play you've got, the more exciting games are. So I think I completely share your view on that. Let's speed the games up. Let's still have the provision to add a lot of time on if we need to. But if we can just get the ball in play a lot quicker, it's more exciting for everyone to watch, it's more exciting for us to coach, and definitely more exciting for everyone to play in.
We're deep into added time for tonight's meeting, so just while the microphone comes down to this end, a really brief one that John and Rich can, I think, give a two-word answer each to. It's not off, don't worry. Who is the best player in League One outside of Pompey?
Wow. The best player outside from me. I think last season I said it was Dion Charles, and I don't think we'll be too far off that, but I'm not going to give a two-word answer to this. I'll give a three-word answer.
Like he's going to say the same one as me.
So Ephron Mason Clark, the left wing at Peterborough, I think has been outstanding now for a couple of years. I'll be very surprised if he doesn't go a lot higher than where he is now. I'm so sorry for nicking your one, Rich.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is he targeted for January?
What our friend was
If we've got 10 million, then
Just a quick one to cover what our friend was talking about, time in the game, and time added on. I watched the game, one of my colleagues is an ex-professional referee, and he made it a point to actually time the amount of time the ball was in play. I can't remember which game it was the first half.
it was actually 26 minutes of 45 that the ball was actually in play. So again, another time it'd be interesting having Hughes and North. It's very big in football at the moment. How do we get around that?
Excellent question. There's a few ideas that people have, have put to. I think put out there. One of them is to have a ball in play clock, which maybe we'll get to eventually. I just do think it's the responsibility of everybody in football. But if you're a side operating in League One, and the argument for one of the so-called smaller sides coming to Fratton Park is that we're coming here, we're competing with far less resources, we're not at Portsmouth, we're going to come here and we're going to have to make the game difficult, so we're going to do it regardless, we don't care. In which case the responsibility falls on the referee to move the game along, and that's the only person that's really going to be able to get the game going. And teams are going to do it, and teams are going to keep doing it as long as we play football. And the honest answer is, if it suited us at the next level or the level above, I'd like to think we'd still be try and play progressive front-footed football, but there are times in games, if we're leading towards the back end of the game, we're not going to be, we're not going to just be incredibly principled and say, right, get the ball back and play quickly whenever we possibly can, which is the way we try and play most of the time. So I think ultimately it falls on the referee, the PGMOL, to make sure that they act within the laws that they've got set for themselves and hurry games along as much as possible.
I think that's my job for this evening. You guys have been so generous with your time. Can we give them a huge round of applause? Not just tonight, but for their work through the season. Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate your continued support for the PST, and have a lovely rest of your evening. Thanks everyone. Cheers.